So really knowing that technology is great, but technology for the sake of technology isn't great. Technology is great to solve challenges. And what we're learning and what I continue to focus people on is, understand that just because you mock it up, just because you do all these things, it doesn't mean it's going to react the same way. It means that you solved probably 90% of your challenges.
Michelle, thank you for chatting with me on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me.
To start us off, can you do a bit of an introduction to yourself, so your role, your organization, and what your focus is?
Yes. So, my name is Michele Mueller. I work for the Michigan Department of Transportation. I manage our connected, automated, and electrification team. But my team is responsible for really what I consider end to end. So, really looking at different things. One being challenges on our infrastructure around crashes, and that's for all modes, whether motorized or non-motorized, commercial to passenger vehicles, different modes, whether e-bikes, transit, you name it. So really looking to say where are the challenges on our infrastructure, and then working with our internal business areas to say, where are you having challenges? Where are we seeing things with the different assets we have? We do also for projects, if you think of something like a cross-border project or whatnot, really looking at, what are the challenges, right? Again, so we're always looking deep into initially what's the challenges we're having and really identify so that we know we're focused on finding solutions for actual challenges and not just doing technology to do technology. And then really working with our industry partners. The cool thing about all three of these technologies of connected, automated, and electrification is really the opportunity of this large depth of industry partners. But there still will always be what I consider two pillars. One will be our deployments, where we are again, identifying those challenges, finding solutions to those. But the key word is finding sustainable solutions to those and really looking at how do you make a difference and also tracking, utilizing performance metrics to say what's the impact of these changes and where are these, the value and benefit coming back, not only to the state of Michigan, but our taxpayer dollars, our users and our visitors of our system. The other pillar, is and will always remain to be, those pilots, right? So new things. But really interesting. We get to work with our testing centers. We have the American Center for Mobility. We have M City. We have Kettering. We have Michigan State. We all have the opportunity of that ecosystem of having companies have a place where they can go and they can work on their technology. They can test it in those different use cases. How do we integrate and where are we integrating that into the rest of our infrastructure elements? So, really cohesively and very long answer, Emily, but I think the users of our system don't care who owns it, right? They want it to work and we want to continue the safety as well as we do with our other border states. And even for us, we are super lucky to have multiple border crossings to Canada. So believe it or not, we do a substantial amount of work with them as well in these spaces.
A lot of stuff is there.
Yeah.
A lot of different stuff that's all very important, and also interconnecting is. So, you mentioned a lot about pilots and developments and deployments. I mean, but also making sure those are sustainable. I was hoping if you had the opportunity to ground them in like a real example. So, as you've mentioned, state of Michigan is kind of a leader in a lot of this stuff. You've got a lot of test beds, a lot of pilots, a lot of deployments on connected and autonomous vehicles. Can you talk through a project where the technology has been used to fix a real problem, not just being in a test bed or to test an idea?
Yeah, so I think we have, a couple examples. One is that we had a startup company that we started working with around and looking at our intersections and, focusing on kind of the near miss type stuff, right? The things we're very reactive, looking to change that and find areas we can be proactive as a DOT. But, those types of things to say, we don't have to wait until a crash happens in order to understand, where things are taking place with near misses to say, hey, flag, like lots of near misses, the numbers are going up. Fortunately, there hasn't been a crash, but let's go check it out. So, and what that did was that's still functioning in Detroit, actually at one of our intersections. But then also, really, that branched us out to looking and doing a research project to look at all types of different systems that are out there, understand how those systems work, and then moving into discussion from the infrastructure systems, just because they are intense, right? It's money to install them, operate them, maintain them, and then now having conversations with the industry to say, can we get some of this information that we need from the vehicles? And then that now has grown into the recent challenge we just are coming off of and actually reviewing submittals for, which is utilizing drones. The other one is we're doing just coming off the integration, the final stages of the Woodward corridor, which is M1 to us as a state. And, that really brings together, the near miss, the pedestrians, the non motorized users, transit, emergency responders, and all of this type of technology that we're doing, and brings that full circle to a whole corridor based as opposed to an intersection. And we'll be actually be debuting that at the ITS America annual meeting in June here in Detroit. So super excited about that as well.
I wanted to go back to that idea of then so you've talked about all these pilots and the testing phases and then eventually using them on real roads and real corridors. What did any of these projects or even a particular project, if you want to pick one, teach you about the difference between testing versus real life?
So what I will say is that I think it teaches all of us a lot. One of the bigger things that I continue to pass to folks and kind of covered this a few minutes ago too, I think is,
Hmm.
the ability to put something in, say, a test center or mock it up or, use, to be honest with you, to some degree, even using some of the AI things, right, that are out there until you actually get that technology and those types of things with traffic that is completely unpredictable of what people are going to do. Never, most of it, you can't even imagine somebody's going to do, right? And you as a human, or you're looking for humans to interpret and understand that and react all at the same time. So really knowing that technology is great, but technology for the sake of technology isn't great. Technology is great to solve challenges. And what we're learning and what I continue and continue to focus people on is understand that just because you mock it up, just because you do all these things, it doesn't mean it's going to react the same way. It means that you solved probably 90% of your challenges, right? Our test centers solve a lot and then use that last 10% to say, okay, we've got some tweaking to do, better understanding. We do find that a lot of our industry folks, just to speak of a car, right, from a car manufacturer or supplier, they have to worry about the car having wheels going down the road. Their biggest thing before was warranty claims, right? Now you've integrated all this technology and all these capabilities where it's not just a car going down the road. Now these same people and companies have to be thinking about, well, for the infrastructure, how does a signal work, right? They don't know how a signal works. They've never had to worry about how a signal works. Well, why is the sign, red? Why can't I make it yellow? Well, it has to be red because of the uniform traffic control device, right? So these things that I don't think we holistically everybody thinks about, but I is the cool thing about doing work in Michigan is that we're at the table having these conversations and we're talking about these through every project they're, educating us, right, on their technology, but we're educating them on the things of the infrastructure that just are not intuitive to understand, what it's doing, why it's doing it, and how it's doing it. And then saying, how do we merge these two together so that they, can communicate and provide the safety and mobility benefits. So that of, all of my years of doing this has been probably one of the more exciting pieces to me is really understanding that the education never stops. That, as normal, just everyday drivers, we just take for granted, right? And we really don't ask questions about it. So, so I would say those are a couple of things that really have, been game changers for me and that still bring, excitement, over these types of things and having those conversations.
So you mentioned a lot of the challenges, and so you guys work with both government and provincial and a lot of private people as well. For as you've mentioned, in some of those challenges of trying to have the education gaps fixed between the two sides. What else have you learned from a lot of these pilots and partnerships about building public trust, particularly when it comes to like the acceptance of new technologies?
Yeah, public trust is tough, especially honestly as a government agency, right? You ever
Yep.
hear anybody say we trust the government? I don't, right? So I think the reality for us is that's always a challenge and will always be a challenge. But instead of, looking at it as people don't trust us, you know, I like to take the position in my team to say, we have to earn that trust, right? We have to earn and we have to build those relationships. They don't care what's in our black box. They don't care about all the geeky, technical, nerdy things that we all tend to like. What they care about is really, what does it do for me, right? A very selfish society that we live in. And that's okay. But really understanding we focus our outreach in a lot of cases to pinpointing how does it help you? How does it bring your kids home? How does it bring your husband or your wife home? Your father, your mother, those type anybody in your family or friends, because people care about that. The numbers of some unknown person that they don't even know in some other state, it's easy to shrug off. And not because they're uncompassionate people, but because that it's just not hit home to them, right? It's not near and dear to them to have that level of impact. So in our outreach, we like to, even if we have like with a road project or we're, working collaboratively or we do our own, we like to have it like for the Electrion project we have for inductive charging. I think the super cool part about that is we go to the public meetings and we take the coils, right? We want them to see what's under a road, what's being put in your neighborhood under the road that you can't see.
Hmm.
So I want you to see it. I want you to do it. I want to go walk out there with you. I'll walk on it. It's safe. But you can't just tell people as a government employee it's safe and expect them to just say, okay. It's really about document, really about substantiating, and really about being very transparent of what we're doing and how do we bring them into what we're doing so that they're an instrumental piece, even just from a knowledge space they get it, right? They understand the context of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it functions. We really, really, really owe it to our citizens, and our users of our system to prove to them why it works and why it's beneficial to them. So, and that's much harder to do
Yeah.
than it sounds.
Yeah. I am curious, are there any, and this can be either on like the public and the community side or the partnerships side. Are there any common misunderstandings that you find come up a lot when it's either connected, electrified, or automated vehicles? You can pick any of the three. Are there any that you find you're constantly having to dispel as like, oh, that's not quite accurate, or this is a bit of a misnomer?
There's many, right? I mean, when you talk about the technology, I think to be honest, one of somewhat has become a little bit, I would say, easier if such a thing exists, is on the connected side, right? I think people are really starting to understand, at least to a high level, right? What does that word actually mean? And how are things happening? And I think the more we can get people exposure to that stuff, the better. On the automated side, I think one of the things is still like just this vision that this thing just like does whatever it wants, however it wants, and it's just, out there doing whatever. Now, not saying that doesn't happen to some degree. But I will say that the focused effort of that is with a very, very, very prominent focus on safety. And I think one of the great things that has happened is, some of these systems, GM has Super Cruise, Ford has Blue Cruise. And as we look at those from the different vehicle manufacturers, people are starting to get a little more concept in their head about like what that means. Those are not autonomous systems, to be very clear. Those are assist systems. But I think it's bridging a little bit of a gap for people to start to get themselves into understanding what an actual autonomous vehicle is. And then a lot of the work and conversations around it's not an autonomous vehicle to me, it's an automated vehicle because it's an
Mhm.
autonomous vehicle that is connected. So that vehicle knows what the signal is, where a pedestrian is, where the guardrail is, where the pavement marking, like all of these things. And it's doing this immense amount of checks and balances, right? Of the video, the LiDAR, all these things they have on these vehicles that's really saying and giving it confirmation of the decisions. And when they can't confirm, they hand back to the driver, right? So all of these things are happening, and I just think people are very people love to drive, right? And whether they love to drive or they love to drive to be in control, they love to be in the driver's seat. And the idea of giving that up is very difficult, right? I mean, people don't, and I think one of the things that I try to explain to people is the analogy of when you get on a plane, let me tell you how often that plane is in automated mode, right? And that pilot is not holding that wheel and doing this all the entire time. But everybody gets on the plane. The airports are full, and things, and people are okay with that because the benefit to them is I can get there faster. I get to my destination. I can I don't have to drive. So I think as you start to think of those things, Emily, is really about how are we sending the messages and what are these, kind of nomers out there, right? That people are hearing and not really understanding. And electrification, the biggest one still that I hear about that is, is it gonna like fry me? Because everybody thinks of lightning, right? If lightning hits you, you're gonna, sizzle up, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna stop your heart, it's gonna do all these things. So people think and automatically tie electrification to those analogies of what they know, growing up and existing in things. So, really spending time to educate people on what that is. But those same people sit with phone chargers by their bed every night, and aren't worried about, any transfer of energy and stuff that's happening, with those wireless phone chargers too. So it's just again, right? It's all about the convenience to people and what they're willing to accept, right out of the gate comparatively to other things.
I think it does tie nicely back to what you said earlier about, how a lot of the work you guys have to put in is explaining why it's valuable for individual people rather than whole collectives and make it important to those individual people. Similar thing, I feel like it's the perceived value for those particular people about why they make a particular choice. So the plane example is a good one, I think. I feel like this has gotten slightly better, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. So often we use acronyms out or we push all these things together. So it'll be like connected and automated vehicles or EVs, and it kind of is a bit of a catch-all for what is quite a complicated thing. And so when people are actually referring to one of those things, they just say, oh, if they're referring to connected vehicles, they say connected and autonomous, which connected vehicles might be autonomous, but not necessarily. And it's just all these different kind of very specifics. Do you think that do you have you found out if there's a way that we can try and avoid siloing all of these different things together? So it's we kind of want them all to be considered separate and not treated the same, but we also don't want them all to be so far apart from each other that they're not talking to each other.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? It gets and I don't know, like, I mean, if you kind of sit and think of, how many meetings in the course of a week, and you're like, okay, well, so you say, and I think we find a lot of those same things happening in some of the multimodal language. Data is a great one, right? Everybody says data. Well, what do you actually mean by data? I think it's starting to smooth out and people really, starting to depict and understand the difference. And it's just now I would say maybe moving to other words, like I said, data and things, AI, right? I mean, just look at the conversations of AI. That it's two letters and it's immensely covers, the entire world. I don't know that we'll ever get away from that, and I don't think it's just this space that has that challenge. I think it's across different, all different kind of areas and stuff outside of just transportation.
For Do you have any advice for other agencies about how do they decide when a project is ready to move beyond the testing phase and into more long-term programs or policies?
Right. So really, is it solving a challenge? Right. Is it providing value back to the state of Michigan in this case? And that's to the state of Michigan, whether to ourselves, to the users of our system or whatnot. And really doing an evaluation to make sure that it is meeting the needs we have. Is it within our strategic plans and our deployment plans and things, of really that vision forward of where we're going as a state, and as a DOT. And then also looking too at some things, especially in these spaces, right, do impact other agencies. You think of just electrification, right? There's not one of the technologies we're doing that don't have that multitude across. And I think the cool part about all that is that we bring all of that together. But, when you really talk about how do you move it forward, it's really where does it align? But again, I will also say that we typically do that up front. So we don't spend no, I'm gonna say we don't. Very rarely we try hard not to be spending resources on things that just don't fit, right? Or are not going to potentially solve a challenge. But every pilot that happens doesn't move forward.
Looking back, is there a particular project or a particular point in time that you think changed how you think about innovation in the public sector?
I don't know if I could pinpoint a time. I will say, and very proud to say that I have been fortunate in the time of my career to work under leadership all the way from our governors down, that have been supportive of technology, have been supportive of utilization towards safety and mobility, and really being supportive of innovation, right? And that means doesn't mean do whatever you want. That means really supporting and having a basis for what we're doing, have the vision there, being transparent and being inclusive of all of our different, areas of the department and, talking through challenges and strategies and how does this align with that. And, really working hard on top of all of that to integrate into kind of what our normal DOT things are. We have been fortunate that we've been able to continue and be so successful in these because we do have leadership all the way from top down. We have legislatures, that are very proactive in the space. We have industry folks that based here in Michigan that are super super supportive and super focused on making their successful of what they can do around providing safety. So I think it's a larger breadth of ecosystem. We always kind of worked and collaborated, of course, with other, even the state agencies I was talking about. But, I guess monumental shift moment there was kind of back in the 2014 timeframe. There was a group of us in different agencies and had some collaboration going and became committed to making that the way we were going to do things. And, that has withstood since now. So we're over 10 years, very successful at that. We have calls, I get a company that comes in. I could have, MEDC on the phone. I could have off me on the phone. I could have Secretary of State. I could have MSP. Like we're all in it and we're all having the conversation and, sharing those so that we can help, folks be successful and we can bring those safety benefits to the state of Michigan. So if I had to pick a monumental moment holistically, I would say that that was the moment, and I'm still to this day very passionate about what we've created there because it's something that companies value. We break the barriers down, right? We don't put people into the government barriers and say, "Well, have fun navigating." We work with them and we break those barriers and break those in those conversations and link up. So very proud of that for Michigan.
Again, another very broad, potentially challenging question. If you were starting again today, what's one thing yeah, what's one thing you would either do earlier or do differently?
Yeah, relevant question, actually. I can even give you a great example. When I
Yeah.
first started, more in the ITS space, I did start in our intelligent transportation system space when I came out of, I spent 10 years in construction. So I did learn a lot managing large construction projects. But when I started in the ITS space, we actually did a project. I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest. Really didn't even know what the words meant. had a lot of talk about acronyms, right? Just acronyms galore. And I remember one of the first meetings I went to for a project. And the first meeting we had, somebody showed up and there was like literally 50 slides, for this project. And I will never forget the day I sat there and I was like, whoa, like, like, I, it was, I didn't even know at that point. I honestly was thinking, what am I doing? Right. It's still a funny story. Still, the folks involved in that meeting, we're all still around and existing, and we still laugh about it. So it's carried forward. But then the next meeting I went to, I literally, because that was just, I don't even think we honestly got, like, if I got to the point we got on slide four, and I was very honest. I said, listen, I don't even know what we're talking about. And there's still, like 46 more slides. So, we had to do little change of repositioning course of action there in conversation. And then the next meeting we had in that, I had gone to Costco or whatever. I got a big, large bottle of Excedrin. So I brought that and, immediately put it in the middle of the table and said, all right, now we're, hunker down and we're really going to learn this. So the funny story, right? True story, of kind of, early in my days. And if I could do something different, I think it would be really to have more abilities to learn more in depth earlier on. Unfortunately, just because of the nature of the beast of what it is and staffing for us and stuff, we don't always get the opportunity to, dig deep, right? And be
Hmm.
super nerdy and do whatever. So when I do get those opportunities and chances to this day, I get really excited. Unfortunately, our workforce, over the past many years, actually, I think to some degree, have been so focused behind a screen and on a
Mm,
phone or computer, whatever, that those human interactions tend to maybe get lost a little bit.
mm.
So I think, really the change in focus on those types of things and to realize how important all of those things are would be something I would change to say, I really wish like I did more of that initially. But, hindsight's 2020 and I learned a lot from those bumps and bruises as well that, contribute to my life today. So,
Awesome. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time chatting on the podcast today.
yes, thank you very much for having me.
To learn more about any of the guests that we have on the Bite Size podcast, you can check out our show notes at compassiot.substack.com. Alternatively, if you'd like to know more about the company that runs this podcast, Compass IoT, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.